Alex, thank you so much for being a guest on our podcast. We've been excited to have you today. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for having me.
Good, good. Well, let's just dive right into things here. Let's
Okay.
start off with what first got you into recruiting and what's kept you in the industry over the years.
Sure. Kind of an interesting story. The internship I did in college, my position after that, I recruited for that. So I was doing college recruitment um, when I was finishing my undergrad and then when I was getting my master's. And there was this individual, her name's Mary Lucas. She was on site doing a lunch and learn, and she was carrying a big box of books. So I just stopped and said, "Do you need help?" And walked her to her car. And she gave me a book called Life Lessons or Lunch Meat and Life Lessons. And it was about her father, who was a butcher, and providing kind of really like Midwestern perspectives on business and how it translated to corporate America. Her first job out of college was being a clinical recruiter, placing fleets of nurses. So that's when I learned about external kind of recruitment and search. And then that same job, somebody called me a couple of years later and said, "Hey, I'm working with this external search firm. We focus on insurance, so life, property, casualty, healthcare, financial services, placing interim level talent." And had a conversation with her leaders. And then 3 weeks later, I moved to Chicago. So it all just kind of happened organically. But I was very grateful to learn about the space and then had somebody that went to that space and saw that my skills were transferable. And so that was January, will be 14 years ago since I've been doing external recruitment for
Yeah.
organizations. I quickly got into healthcare, or found an interest in healthcare out of all the spaces I was supporting. And it's been really fun watching the evolution of healthcare, focusing on payers and providers and vendor support companies. So I've just been doing it since, and it's been a fantastic career.
That's amazing. It's always fun to hear. I my one of my favorite questions I ask is the first one. What got you into it? Because it's so different every time, right? You help somebody with
Sure,
books. I'm kind of a big guy in karma. And what goes around comes around. You do good, good comes, And
sure.
I think that's just awesome. That's awesome to know. And I'm curious, just so that the listeners have an idea for a basis. Who's your typical client and your typical candidate? You hinted at healthcare, but let's dive into that just a little bit more before we get into the meat of the questions.
Fantastic. So I partner with payers and providers. So insurance companies within healthcare, and then providers that are providing the care. So medical groups, health systems, independent hospitals, and any sort of organizations that support them. So whether it's digital health, PBMs, TPAs,
Mhm.
uh, consulting firms. I do a lot of work with associations, foundations, really anything that needs a strong, comprehensive network of healthcare and an understanding of how everything ties together. And then we work nationally, so it really just depends on where our relationships are, what we'll be taking on at any given moment. I started on the payer side and expanded to provider. My colleague who joined me, her name's Amy Jones. She was with previous firms prior, one of the big named one that's Checka. So she started on the provider side and has learned the payer space. So it's really fun, especially as we're getting more integrated. We work with a lot of provider sponsor health plans. And so it's been really fun kind of doing it all, but coming from both sides of the healthcare space has been really, really good.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. That's amazing. And it's so good for listeners to know because, I mean, I tell all of our listeners, or at least all the ones that I know that, or speak with, or, send messages to, whatever, that, we're not going to rely on you to know everything that's going on in the market and take it as 100%. This is every time. But it's good to know where that basis is coming from, the background behind it. So I appreciate you filling me in there and the
Sure.
audience. But I'd like to go over, I know you're building that practice in Kansas City, right?
Yeah.
Right. Congratulations on that. And I want to know
Thank you.
what prompted the move and what has surprised you most in the first, the first few months that you did it. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic question.
Yep.
I've been very um, slow to make a move. They've been very patient with me. I met them years ago by natural networking, and we've been able to provide some introductions to each other, some of the leaders here, and I organically got to know them over the years. I'm quite discerning when it comes to search firms. Not to paint with a broad brush, but when there's no regulation behind it, anybody with a phone and a computer can say they're a recruiter. And I feel like a lot of companies have gotten burned from
Mm.
people after the money or after the next dollar or the next placement. I'm very relationship focused in how I operate, and I found that very similar approach with Hanover. So after getting to know them and just networking over the years, I saw that they were really investing in people. And I got to the point with the companies I was supporting that I truly just needed to scale up from resource perspective, the technologies here, just everything. It's a well-oiled machine and with really people that operate with integrity. So I just thought it was an organic time. I was with my previous shop for almost 11 years and I just needed to scale up for my clients. So what kept me at my previous firm was my clients. I love who I get to work with, but it got to the point doing this so many years, I really need to scale up with the relationships I have. And I think Hanover provides that infrastructure.
Yeah, yeah. It's so interesting because you showed that when we first spoke, talking about you being a guest on the podcast, not to just toot your own horn, right? But or not to make you just feel good, but really genuinely, you were very focused on the relationship. You talked about how you could help us, what we do, what the benefits would be, how we could work together. And I just went to lunch with somebody yesterday, and I was traveling with some guys this weekend for business. And I've noticed the relationships that really grow are the people that don't say, like, hey, how could we both be successful? But it's, what can I do to help you? And how does that work? And it creates those relationships. And then I have a coach, and he talks always about where value goes, money flows,
Oh, I like
and
that.
it's just you see the success, you see things coming, where you have more things come when you just actually do more to help people. And so, anyways, I won't go off on a huge tangent. Does that you
No,
feel like you have something to say
I
to that?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, early in the space, a previous leader had said, if you do the right thing, compensation follows. And truly, it's as simple as that. So
Yeah.
yeah, so to answer the second part of that question, it's been going great. I mean, it's been a fantastic start. We have a handful of clients. We've had some placements already. It's been 5 months for me. My colleague joined 4 months ago. So it's been great. I mean, everybody here is there's been no surprises. I'm glad it was organic over the years, and everything I thought and learned along the way has been true. So it's
Yeah.
been fantastic. And I do think it's going to get busy going into Q1.
Good, good. Well, congratulations. The placement's already, the thing's moving.
Yeah,
That's
thank you.
exciting. That's really exciting. So we're excited to follow you along your journey. I'm gonna at the end when we talk about what's the best way to connect with you. I hope all of our listeners follow the journey, see what's happening, and see how you
Sure.
grow as well. Um, let's talk about one thing that you think makes a candidate stand out fast.
Great. I think, we get the privilege of working with brilliant people, just so many degrees, have years of experience. I think humility comes across very early in conversations. I think that that really stands out to me because being able to treat people with kindness and respect, even though they are so brilliant and have done so much more than little old me, I think that that is really standing out whenever we vet candidates. I also think being able to articulate your story. In healthcare, there's been a lot of reduction in forces, right? So there's some short stints. If people can really articulate that early to build confidence that they're not just jumping around, I think that that stands out to me as well.
I love both of those. With regarding the humility, and then we'll jump into the other one as well. But with humility, do you feel like it's harder to find humility? We talk about humble confidence quite a bit on on this podcast, honestly, because it seems to be at the executive level when you have so many years of experience, so many degrees, there's a nice balance because you could come off really overconfident. But anyways, I don't want to answer the question for you. What do you think?
No, I do think that it is definitely a fine line. Typically, the clients that retain us for executives, they're looking for executive presence. They're looking for people that command respect out of the gates at the table, that want to, when they speak, be listened to. So there is that confidence that we need, but it's also a good vetting. If somebody's treating you transactionally or flagrantly, maybe that's a qualifier that they're not really serious about. Maybe they're just a bad day. Maybe they're not really looking for their next step. So it's
Mm,
not, I would say, hard to find, but whenever people downplay their success because they've lived it and breathed it, those are usually the seasoned folks that we want because they've had big responsibility. They've had a lot on their plate, and sometimes it makes some of what people at different parts of their career might be bigger to them. So I wouldn't say it's hard to find. It just does stand out to me when people are like, oh, yeah, we've experienced that, and not really hanging on that they've done amazing things, which they
Right.
have. But I don't know. I just think it's the EQ behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'll just do a quick highlight over what you're talking about with knowing how to explain the short stints. I mean, we don't have to dive into that too much, but I think it's crucial, it's simple, and people need to remember that. There's a lot of things you have to do to prepare for the interview, but what I'm seeing is a lot of people say, I didn't think they'd ask me that, or I don't know how to answer that. And that's a real thing to just knock down, make sure you have a solid answer of why these stints, right? You can have a really simple answer, but maybe I'd love to hear your thoughts on it real quick before we switch gears.
Sure. And I think that it's that being that liaison with the client, right? Is sometimes these clients are with a single state entity where your candidate might be over multi states or multi locations. So our clients might not have as much of a finger on the pulse of mergers, acquisitions, affiliations, those sorts of big reductions that impact the talent market. So it's a good reminder to the candidates to say, hey, this is who's on the other side. They haven't experienced a layoff. So they haven't experienced XYZ. So I think just have your story ready to say, hey, this is what happened. Or without getting too much in the personal, of course, sometimes candidates upfront information, hey, I had family health. I had to take a few months off, or we had to relocate because of this. And it's a smaller market and there were less jobs, or we were doing a super commute and it didn't work out. So just having that ready, like an extended elevator pitch, I think is very important for candidates. So if they don't have that, I usually try to pull that out and have them kind of just be able to articulate that when they get to the client.
Yeah, and I want to underline the beauty of working with somebody like you as a candidate, having a connection, knowing Alex, because you can also, like what you mentioned, you could say, "Hey, these guys aren't familiar with mergers and acquisitions. These guys haven't gone through a layoff." So make sure you have this, this experience, this story listed or easily digestible so that they can understand who you are, what you do, and then it all makes sense. So I
Sure.
love that, and I want to go into mistakes in interviews because I think it's a really easy segue here from what we're talking about. What would you say are maybe the two most common mistakes that healthcare executives are making in interviews right now?
Common mistakes in an interview.
Yeah.
So I would say when people talk to us, sometimes there's that energy of, oh, you're just a recruiter. I will polish up or tighten up when we get to the client part of it. But being a retained executive model, we're an augmentation of our client. So we're vetting from the first second, right? We talk to them on behalf of our clients. So I would say that's just kind of sometimes a mistake with candidates being a little bit distracted or taking away that this is actually an interview and this is an important part of the process. I would say when they get to the clients, I would say attire sometimes. I think since COVID and working from home, we still have to dress for an interview. I mean, on the day to day, it's a lot more casual, right? But for an
Yeah.
interview, I think that there's still an appetite from certain clients out there. And that's our job as the executive search consultant or the liaison to prep people for the kinds of clients you're going to be interviewing for. But I think that those are the ones that come to mind immediately.
You know what's so funny? We just made a partnership with our company with somebody that helps with making sure you're dressing for the role that you're interviewing for. Right? That's what they do. That's their career. And they have a great business doing it.
Oh,
So I just wanted to underline. I think it's great and it's something that I haven't thought about, but it's really common, especially after COVID, right? A lot of people aren't dressing to the part and to the expectation and having the confidence going in. Um, what,
that's
yeah,
I think
sorry, keep
there's a
going.
big need for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. I love what you said there. I mean, really common mistakes. And I just interviewed somebody. Our sales team is growing at our company. And I think what people don't understand, like what you mentioned, every conversation, every email, every text, that is part of the interview, right? I mean, people are not understanding the value of being authentic, but also knowing who you're talking to and who their relationship is. I always think of the recruiter as a referral, right? I mean, it's like getting a friend telling you about somebody that you should hire for your company, right? The recruiter has the connections with the organization, right? If you're not giving off good energy or whatever it is to the recruiter, they're not going to want to stick their necks out because that's bad for you, right?
Absolutely. And at this stage, I mean, some of the people I've worked with have been my whole career in this. So the level of trust,
Hmm.
it's never to be breached, right? So we want to make sure our we have full trust in a lot of these relationships that we're supporting. So of course we're going to be looking at this very carefully because it's not just we met these people yesterday. A lot of times we've known them for a decade or 12 years or they're a meaningful connection to somebody else. Um, Either way, we really try to um, be honest and operate with integrity because we want to make sure we have a win on all sides. And to your point, every step of the way, we're vetting these people to make sure it's a match, not only for our clients that we're augmenting, but for the candidate too, because nobody just wants to fill seats. And if they do, I don't
Yeah.
think that it's going to be a sustainable career.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. 100% agree. And I've got another question for you. I'm going to read it, this one, because it's a
Okay.
little bit longer. So, in your experience, what does a great first conversation with a recruiter look like from the candidate side, right? We're already kind of hinting at it. We're already brushing into that area. What should executives do and what should they avoid, right? Maybe this question is just hinting a little bit more, a little bit deeper on what we've been talking about. But what are your thoughts?
So I think being intentional and being open is very important, right, for the candidates out of the gates. I think that sometimes there's an appetite of, oh, well, I'll have a conversation or let's see where it goes. But we really need to be thoughtful about this, not only for our client's sake, but for the candidates. We don't want them to just have conversations and not have it be meaningful and then that be remembered down the line, right? So we want to make sure to really vet candidates to say, are you really serious about this opportunity? And how serious? And is this a match? And let's make sure to have everything really teed up before we get to that client space. So, from the candidate's perspective, um, I think that understanding the company, understanding, if the match and being upfront, I think there's a lot of recruiters that don't touch on compensation. I am not one of that. I work with a lot of nonprofits. That's just the reality of it. So we at least need to make sure we're aligned in all areas from that conversation. And I think that usually candidates leave the conversation knowing the scope, knowing the story of the company that you can't just look on a website, right? And then knowing the compensation and then identifying a next step. I think that that's the most important piece, whether it's the person wanting to take a few days or take a week or talk to their support system. Because a lot of times it's relocations for what we take on.
Mhm.
Um, Understanding where we're at in the search with other candidates in the process, and then really having a follow up identified. I think that that's all of those pieces makes for a good candidate experience.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I love the idea of being intentional. It's actually like one of the themes for my wife and I right now in our family is, being intentional, making sure that you know what you're doing. You're talking to people because you know what they're looking for. You're talking to people not just because you're having 20 conversations a day with whoever will hop on the phone.
Sure.
I love that. I love that. And let's talk about, I mean, the last 5 years in healthcare has been a roller coaster, right? With healthcare talent, things that are going on from the pandemic disruption, everything. What changes are you seeing in 2025, and what do you think executives should expect going into 2026?
Very good question. So usually election years, there's a pause, right?
Hmm.
So was not at all shocked by the pause in hiring, but that bled into this year, right? That bled, and the pausing has been impacting, I think, a lot of movement. We've seen a significant amount of senior leaders move. I've seen some early retirements, but the pendulum always swings back. I just think that the financial situation coming off of the pandemic or the global health crisis has been a big barrier with the Medicaid unwinding, with this new bill, with vendors and everything overhead going up. Healthcare it's been tough. In previous years, I would see companies shift and say, okay, we'll get consultants or we'll get fractional work with different monies, right? Because it's not
Hmm.
FTE money, it's different. Well, that wasn't an option. So I feel like I've seen a lot of fatigue with senior leaders resulting in movement. When movement happens like this, there's going to be attrition. So there's going to be so many circumstances that I'm sure we've all seen, right? Somebody wanted the promotion, they went with an external hire, that person moves on. Or maybe it was a peer that got promoted and the dynamic changes, right? So there's going to be, with all of this stuff to be tried, there's going to be that storming, forming, and norming, right? I think that there's going to be a lot of shifts with dynamics into the new year.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, healthcare is going nowhere. People need good people. There's a lot of key positions that you have to have for state contracts, and then for growth. So, what we've seen, in addition to the compensation being kind of struggles in healthcare, modality has shifted. I remember in 2020, a lot of the smaller um, companies, not hospitals, but a lot of the smaller companies on the payer side had no business continuity set up. So they didn't have infrastructure, they didn't have laptops. Everybody got laptops, and then there was a lot of work from home or 100% remote companies. Production
Hmm.
went down with some companies. Sometimes it's worked out. We're seeing so much hybrid. So I think modality has shifted the last several years, specifically significantly in healthcare. So I think that modality will be something to keep an eye on next year. Mid this year, I've heard a lot of return to office mandates. So I think that that may be on the horizon as well. Um, but I do feel positive energy, and maybe it's starting, Jesse, starting with a new firm and knocking on every door I know and getting the opportunity to catch up with people that I know and respect that I've known for sometimes upwards to 15 years.
Yeah.
Um, and just really being so heads down, I suppose. But I do feel, on top of that, the pendulum is swinging back in healthcare. We actually heard from 3 clients yesterday about potential searches, and that just doesn't happen every day. So usually when those, I mean, we're a two-person shop with a significantly fantastic organization, but our division is small. That's a lot of traction in one day. So I feel the
Yes.
pendulum swinging back for next year. I think Q1 again is going to be very, very busy for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's so good for our listeners to hear. I think a lot of people are I've got, LinkedIn, lots of times what I've seen is a lot of negative news gets pushed in the algorithm more and it's really popular there. And we don't have to dive into that too much, but I love hearing the positive side. I love hearing, hey, there is, I'm seeing there should be an uptick, right? I mean, placements, companies growing, things like that, so that people don't always just hear layoffs. You know what I mean? Knowing that people are seeing good things, there's placements that are happening.
Well, and I do think we'll see more reduction in forces, but at the
Right.
director to C level, the
Hmm.
more niche, the background and the skill set, the product knowledge, the population served, I think that that's where I'm seeing the shift. It takes me back to 2022, the war on talent. End of 2022, IT got hit very bad, and
Hmm.
healthcare followed in short order. I've been able to sustain my book and my relationships because I've been doing this for so long, right? It's all worked out. I would say this might be a scary space to get into out of the gates with no relationships, but at the same time, I think it's all about who you partner with, and that's again back to another facet of why I wanted to come to Hanover, because they are so diversified. They've been doing this in different areas, different industries, and they all have different expertise. And they were willing to take a chance in getting an excitement about getting into healthcare. So um, I think that I think things are going to get good. But again, I focus on that director to C level. I do think that frontline staff are unfortunately going to be impacted into the new year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. I agree. I'm happy that you clarified that. I'm thinking mostly for our listeners, director, VP, C-level executives. Let's talk about there is some competition when it comes to applications. So, what advice would you give to executives who have strong experience, right? What we're talking about, high-level executives, and they're struggling to get traction with competing with so many applicants. What would you say is the top thing you'd suggest that they maybe focus on?
So I always reference, because there's been a lot of struggle, right, with people not even getting phone calls. And
Hmm.
I'm sympathetic to the internal folks having so many recs. Whenever you have less people hiring, the people doing the hiring internally, there are less of them, and they have so much. We're That's where we can step in and help, right?
Hmm.
But it's too bad some of these leaders that are fantastic and I always joke, I'm like, that's why we get hired. Like you're going to the company because it's an employer's market. That is a gift. Not all these qualified people are applying. So when they fall through the cracks and they don't even get an email, it's disheartening. But I
Mhm.
always my first suggestion is making sure that they have like an applicant tracking compliant resume to make
Yep.
sure to get through whatever AI inputs. I know that that has been kind of a barrier to some and a learning curve because a lot of these executives, they've never had to find jobs. The jobs found them. Well, the landscape has changed. So I would say making sure you have the right tactical stuff, like the
Mhm.
CV is appropriate for these search engines. I would say make sure, especially in healthcare, so I mean, maybe it's other industries. I just only know this. So many acronyms, Jesse. So many. So I'm always like, put LTSS and long-term support services and whatever your state's calling that program, or like I'm like get detailed so folks like us can find you. I would also say the third. So the resume, search engine optimization. I would say the third thing is of course networking, and not just with recruiters or one recruiter. Talk to several, talk to past colleagues, ask questions, make sure people know you're out there. I mean, there was just one example. Last week, somebody I got connected with a client from 14 years ago, uh, almost 14 years ago. She had
Mhm.
connected me to somebody. We had a mutual person, and I had emailed and said, "Hey, this person's in the market. You met at a conference 2 years ago. Unsure if there's space for this candidate, just making sure you knew they were available." And the response was, "Oh, thanks for letting me know. I did see she was impacted. I will probably reach out just for general networking soon." So there's no job offer, but those sorts of activities and networking and helping people, I think that that's the approach. I think that we all just need to make sure to be available for a call. I mean, we got connected by a previous colleague, Lynn. I love
Yep.
that.
Mhm.
And now it's been, I wouldn't have known about you. I, I love that networking piece. And if people are actively in the market or not, networking is really, it's mandatory.
Yeah. I 1000% agree. Right. I mean, especially networking. If you're not looking, whoever is listening that isn't looking right now, if you start networking now, it's going to pay off later, right? Because that's where I think people are struggling is they start networking, they start diving into old things when they need a job in a month, you know, and then
Well,
it's just scrambling.
and that's how my journey with Hanover came about because I've known them, I trust them, I really like them over the years. Then I started realizing I probably need to scale up and get with a bigger firm.
Yeah.
Well, at that point, I've talked to a couple of the big shops that have reached out, and I just love the size of Hanover and just again their approach. But that was a 5 year recruit that happened organically, and then when I was ready to make a move, here we are. So without that networking, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Thank you for saying that. And what, switching gears a little bit, one last
Okay.
question for you is when a healthcare executive is evaluating a new opportunity, right? What's one question you wish more candidates asked you to make sure the role is actually a good fit for them? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think that sometimes it happens at the end of a process where candidates are asking about long-term growth potential. That could happen a little earlier. We could start having those conversations, you don't want to think like I just want this job for 6 months then I want a promotion, but we want to understand what's next. What's the trajectory if I join this organization should it all work out. So I think that maybe career development. I also think really what is keeping the hiring manager up at night. Is there a big project that's going on? You can see what you can see on the resume, but really understanding the projects and the initiatives, not just what's happening in the next 6 to 12 months, what's happening in the next couple of years. Are we getting in different markets? Are we acquiring? Are we growing by acquisition? What's happening that they can share that they're privy to. I think that those pieces I think should be talked about a little bit more.
I love that. It's almost like a sales tactic, right? I mean, showing that you're invested, you're with the company, right? I mean, I'm no professional at sales, but you're with the company and you're looking at, hey, how can we be successful together for years to come? Not just this role, and that's the only thing I need. I just need a job right now, right?
Yep, absolutely.
I love that. Thank you, Alex. And I thank you for all your thoughts today. I mean, it's been
Sure.
amazing. I loved everything you've shared. What's the best way for potential clients or candidates to connect with you and learn more from you?
Yeah, I they can email me. I'm always happy to provide time, and even if it's not healthcare, if anybody needs a perspective of somebody that does what myself, my colleague Amy, or any of the team here at Hanover has, happy to be the starting point. I'm happy to. A lot of times I'm a sounding board or a barometer of what's going on in the space, and
Mhm.
especially some of these folks that they haven't never needed to be in this position. Happy to provide any sort of perspective or value. So email would be great, and I can see who how I can help or how people I know can help.
Okay. Are you okay with me sharing that email in
Absolutely.
the description below? Okay. So everybody listening, we'll put that email in the description so that they can reach
Great.
out to you. And thank you so much. Hopefully we'll have you on again. So thank you for your
Oh,
time.
love that. Thank you
And
so much for the opportunity, Jesse.
yeah,
Would love to, yeah, stay in touch and let you know how things grow here with the practice. Like I said, we're out of the gates, having a lot of fun helping people, and I think that next year is going to be very busy.
good, good. Well, excited to follow along. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.